Guys, I'm back. This video could be slightly longish, but bear with me, you will learn a lot. And there's been a popular demand that I do something on BRICS. Here's the first thing, right? I think BRICS, firstly, most of you know, was created by Goldman Sachs as one of the acronyms earlier to direct funds to, right? And this is fast money. We are talking about stock markets and bonds, nothing else. It was not, and the economies after the creation of BRICS just did not live up to their expectation, right? And BRICS, really, for India and for the rest, what does it really mean? Really, while our papers were on and on about whether Modi would meet Xi, plus there was talk about expansion, plus there was talk about common currency. Here's the thing about expansion. Both India and Brazil have resisted this for a long time. But now it's looking to be cussed if we continue to do that. Why we wanted to limit this expansion is because everybody knows that this is basically a China and Russia club to bash the US and Europe. And he really did not want to be in that same group or band of bandits, as I would say, right? So in a sense, India did manage to put its view across, and the new additions, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Argentina, Iran, Ethiopia, most of them leaving Iran. Iran is obviously in the bandwagon with Russia and China to beat up on the United States and Europe. The rest are all strategic partners of the United States, and they really are not going to get together. They really are not going to get together to beat up on the United States. And that was one of the key reasons to allow Saudi Arabia, UAE, or invite Saudi Arabia. They have not accepted it so far. And we've been raining on China's parade, whether it's BRI, CPEC, RCEP. China still begging us to join the RCEP. And look what happens, right? Goyal comes out, China minister present. Goyal says India heart with USA, not RCEP. Now let me just explain this RCEP and this BRICS and tell you how big a dud it is, right? So combined GDP before the expansion is 27.6 trillion, right? Which is low, which is much smaller than the Europe and the US combined, right? Now within this, just see the anomaly, right? Brazil 1.89 trillion, making up just 7%. Russia 2.06 trillion, making up 7%. India 3.5 trillion, making up 13%. China 19.73 trillion, making up 71%. So it is a China camp, right? So if you have a common currency also, folks, it's all about China. India has been pushing for the use of the Indian currency versus each other, not to create a BRICS currency like the Western analysts think. It's never going to happen. India is not going to allow it. And especially, how can you allow it to be a currency with systems like, with opaque systems like Russia and China, right? And South Africa just 0.41 trillion, making it just 1%. Okay. Now the add-on C is even funnier. Saudi Arabia's GDP is 1.12 trillion. UAE is just 0.5 trillion. Egypt 0.38 trillion. Argentina 0.61 trillion. Iran 0.40 trillion. Ethiopia 0.16 trillion. Together now we have 30.16 trillion. And guess what? Percentage-wise, Brazil goes down from 7 to 6, Russia stays at 7 to 7, India goes from 13 to 11, China still stays at 64, and the rest all straggle in at 1112. How can this kind of environment create a grouping of like-minded people? They're pulling at each other. Look at the trade figures, like India with Russia. Last year ran a 34.8 billion deficit, folks. 34.8 billion. Exports have gone down 13% year on year, while imports have gone up 384%. China, we ran a deficit of 87.15 billion. Get that, 87.15 billion, up a couple of percent. And guess who we've got a surplus with? The people we love to beat up on, the United States, 28.07 billion. So we had these couple of guys on Chaturati, on one of the radio channels beating up on the United States. Say, well, do you even know what the United States is? Anyway, let's just not talk about what the commentators were saying. What can BRICS achieve? A China cloud looms large over the meeting. India will have to manage the contradictions. It cannot did. BRICS might have been. This is by Pratap Bhanu Mehta. World needs more rebalancing against both the US and China. BRICS is not kept its promise. He says the rebalancing against a dominant developmental order designed by the West is an important feature of global politics, but it has been completely complicated by several developments. First, the demand for rebalancing is now arguably directed as much against China as anyone else. Arguably, the strategic rebalancing against China is at least as much a concern for the developing world as rebalancing the West. Then we have C. Raja Mohan. He writes, not the new norm. One principal objective of NAM was to stay away from rival power blocks. The BRICS, in contrast, is led by one of the competing power blocks, the Sino-Russian alliance. That's what it really is about. Why are so many countries lining up to join BRICS? For the same reason Russia and China found the forum to the hedge against West. Beijing and Moscow want to leverage the BRICS to negotiate bilateral compacts with Washington. At stake for both are not ideological qualms about reconciling with the West, but settlement terms. Enhancing the bargaining power with the US drives most countries towards the BRICS. On top of it, posturing against the West plays well at home for most political elites. Unlike in Bandung, the post-colonial cities are not today animated by ideology. They want to play hardball with the great powers. What does that mean? Focus on the politics of BRIC summit. Don't take the rhetorical hot air from Johannesburg too seriously. Expansion of BRICS to be main focus of Group South Africa meet. India backs BRIC expansion on consensus basis, says PM, and that happened, right? Robbie Grammer and Christina Liu writes in the FP, can Russia and China breathe new life into BRICS? The global South is hungry for an alternative to the Western dominated order, but BRICS may not be up to the task. Okay, what it says is, like then, BRICS serves as an alternative if incoherent effort to push back against the hegemon of the day, although one that has been complicated by China's and Russia's membership. Complicating the matter is the fact that BRICS countries have vastly disparate national interests, and vague proposals to expand the bloc's membership and economic influence seem poised to stumble out of the gate. India and China are at loggerheads. South Africa is caught between a diplomatic rock and a hard place over its ties to Russia amid the war in Ukraine, and Brazil has done little to stick its neck out for Russia despite its historically non-aligned foreign policy. All BRICS countries, even China, face economic headwinds that make any future plans to challenge the US-led Group of Seven spot at the top of the global economy more pipe dream than reality. That's why good old Goyal said what he did. He rather has his heart for the United States. And the Western media, which calls this a global South, we've got to make sure this is... China is and Russia are not, folks, leaders of the global South. They have hijacked. China has hijacked this, got into the WTO and ripped rest of the world apart. Don't allow them to get away with it, right? Then you have Alexander Sharp, right? BRICS Business Forum, he says, but not everyone is on board with opening BRICS doors, although Russia wants new allies to support its war effort. India and Brazil both fear that rushing into expansion would dilute the bloc's influence globally and exercise caution on plans to expand BRICS. This is what Sriram Chola writes. Turning it into an ideological cheer squad for China's struggle with the US is not the interest of global South. The larger the institution, the lower the efficiency in the terms of concrete, practical deliverables. Still, India or Brazil cannot be seen to be blocking or vetoing deserving large developing countries from BRICS membership, as that would harm their bilateral relationship with those nations. That's what happened. Hence, the Indian insistence on first establishing rules for expansion and criteria for admission rather than opening the doors a Paul Mel manner. The BRICS ship can founder if it's commandeered by China or turn into a big tent talking shop which issues angry declarations and denunciations of the US but does nothing tangible on the ground. That's what's going to happen. This guy was the man out and I can't understand him at all. And he's totally wrong. Zorawar Daulat Singh. Second, the most visible success of BRICS at an economic level has been funding of the new development bank in 2014. Since its launch, NDB has financed 100 projects with US 34 billion. What I want to ask Mr. Daulat, go dig deep down. This 34 billion has worked itself back into Chinese companies that not typically attract conventional forms of credit. Expanding the bank's membership and hence its capital base will widen, but I don't think so. Another pressing issue that BRICS has been the vocal about for years is the need for sustainable global finance architecture. China's architecture is anything but stable, Zorawar. Everybody, they're given loans at such high interest rate. In 2008, global financial crisis was the initial impetus for BRICS. The ripple effects of the Ukraine war has been a turning point. India takes lead in forging consensus on selection of new BRICS members, which it did. BRICS expansion, national currency use top agenda. PM Modi to take part in BRICS Johannesburg meet. He did that. BRICS is brittle and may it remain so. That's what Somnath Mukherjee writes. He says, the grouping today is a pretty toothless talk shop, but this serves India's interests and prevents the rise of another strident anti-West China-dominated platform. But BRICS has struggled to graduate beyond being a talk shop. There's a lot of talk about a BRIC currency, but none of the 5 members is able to run an exchange rate monetary policy regime that even approximates the US. That's the problem. Free trade zones, India stayed out of the prestigious RCEP trade pact, pointedly due to China. Further, India's analogous to the US is getting increasingly wary of trade deficits with the investments from China. Despite the contradictions and lack of success, it is in India's interest to remain in the forum. Absolutely. PM to attend slew of BRICS meets over 2 days. Modi's presence to give a big push to Global South at BRICS Summit. Even Indian commentators, Dipanjan Chawla. There is no Global South. Global South has to be minus China. BRICS NSA meet in South Africa to explore security cooperation. China confirms Xi to attend BRICS Summit. Speculation grows over PM Xi meeting at BRICS. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Argentina lead race to become BRIC members. India-China ties in focus as PM leaves for BRICS Summit today. LAC commanders work on limited pullback plan, wait for signal from top. This was all done to create a conducive environment that Xi would give in to the pleading of Modi for a meeting. Okay. Beijing pushes for BRICS expansion in effort to create stronger rival to G7. Didn't happen. Expansion, hopefuls, okay to level global playing field. Like I said, it will not happen. Then you have not another bricks in the wall. This is by Swaminathan Iyer. He says, foil the grouping's expansion that would make expansionate China dominant. Finally, India should argue strenuously for forgiving unpayable debts to the World Bank and IMF. China wants BRICS to become the champion of the global south, but China is not a champion of the global south. China is a champion of itself. Chinese domination of the BRICS must be checked at every instance. Oppose reckless expansion. China strongly favors expansion. I don't think so. 6 new entrants set to make BRICS a wall, a counterweight to West. Absolutely not. BRICS invites 6 more nations in move to grow group's cloud. BRICS expands from 5 to 11. PM says this sends a message to all. But this is what it really is. Putin uses BRICS summit to justify Russia war in Ukraine. China and Russia criticize West at summit in Africa. Putin and Xi seek to shape BRICS as anti-West bloc. This is what India has to stop it. Facing China at BRICS, India stands its ground. The most contentious aspect of Johannesburg was the BRICS expansion, with China pushing for the inclusion of as many as 22 new members. On this deeply fractious matter, too, India put its foot down by insisting on a per capita GDP benchmark and excluding candidates who will be more a burden than an asset. India may have stayed off the institutional capture of BRICS by China. It is not a coincidence that 5 of the newly admitted member states, Argentina, Egypt, Iran, Saudi Arabia, UAE, are formal strategic partners of India, with the 6th invitee, Ethiopia, coordinates with India in multinational forums. Though the 6th nation also partake in China's Belt and Road Initiative, none is abjectly beholden to China and none can be taken for granted. Important. The Johannesburg summit revealed how far India has come on the international stage. Yes, China is still leaps ahead of other members of BRICS, but India's surge, predicated on its concrete achievements, is all set to demonstrate and level the playing field. Watch the space, especially after the landing of the Chandrayaan. And then what do we have? People say brick by Alexander Shah. He says, but why these 6 nations were chosen out of the more than 40 countries that demonstrated interest in joining is complicated. Both Brazil and India had initially expressed hesitation over expanding the bloc, saying it could dilute BRICS power and hurt their own ties with the United States. Therefore, having nations such as UAE and Saudi Arabia join appease those concerns. Both Persian Gulf countries are close partners with Washington and host US troops within their borders. By adding them to BRICS, the bloc would show that anti-US sentiment is not required to join the alliance, while at the same time pushing against Western influence in the Gulf. Saudi Arabia has not yet confirmed it will join the bloc, saying it wishes to wait for further details on that membership might require. Then finally, joining BRIC decreases Iran's global isolation. Then there are 2 African additions, Egypt and Ethiopia among aspiring BRICS members. Greatest interest has come from the African continent as the United States, Russia, China all vie for foothold there. Lastly, there's Argentina, the only Latin American country to clinch a membership invite. Buenos Aires hopes that BRICS support under its new development bank will boost the country's worsening fiscal crisis, particularly as Argentina suffers from dwindling US reserves. So here's the deal, right? We had to stay in this to upset, not let this China run away with this whole thing like RCEP, etc. We've done a good job because, like this last article said, we've been able to balance it with a lot of people who are not going to take either an anti-West or an anti-US. UAE, Egypt. Egypt, remember, flies, the only country that flies both platforms of fighter aircraft. United States and Russia. Where to go, folks? I think India did achieve fair amount of business at BRICS. The problem was we had centered our BRICS expectations on a meeting with Xi, which in my view, which will be the next interesting chapter next time, was a dud. 3 cheers and Jai Hind.